1 million people on Mars by 2050. This is just one of the bold claims that Elon Musk has made about a mission to Mars, and as exciting as it might sound, it's a flat-out lie. And it's not the first time Musk has made an outrageous claim about Mars.
Eventually you can transform Mars into an Earth-like planet.
In this video, we'll cover various statements he's made over the years about the red planet, from Martians not having to worry about radiation to how dropping nukes would be a good idea. And we'll tell you whether these claims are true or false. Then we'll imagine a world where this could happen one day. Number 6. 1 million on Mars by 2050. In January 2020, Elon Musk told us he'd have 1 million people on Mars by 2050. Okay, well, how would he pull this off? Well, he broke it down for us on Twitter. Yeah, it was still called Twitter then. Elon told us that he'd build a fleet of 1,000 starships. This is the super rocket that's getting us to Mars. Each starship will carry 100 people, and if all of them took off one after the other, we'd have 100,000 people landing on Mars in no time. Repeat this process 10 more times, and that's 1 million people on the red planet. Okay, that was simple. But wait, it wouldn't actually be this easy. And there's one big reason. To use the least amount of fuel, we can't just fly over to Mars whenever we want. No, we have to make sure we're timing the trip properly so that Earth and Mars sync up geographically speaking. Why does this matter? Well, since Earth travels around the Sun faster than Mars, SpaceX would have to fire starships off at a point when Mars is slightly ahead of us. And this special window of time only occurs once every 26 months. So over a period of 21 years, we'd have 10 launch windows. In each launch window, we'd need to fly 100,000 people to Mars. And remember, each of our starships can carry just 100 people. So in order for Elon to reach the magic number of 1 million people by 2050, well, we'd need to start by getting 100,000 new Martians on the planet by 2029. And isn't that coming up pretty quick? But before we get to that, take a look at this. I just got this awesome new ring made of tungsten, meteorite, even some dinosaur bone. Yeah, cool, right? Well, it's from the sponsor of today's video, Gentle Bands. We here at the What If team were thinking, hey, we talk about the cosmos and dinosaurs all the time. Why don't we give our fans an opportunity to touch and feel these things? Well, with Gentle Bands, you can do just that. They have dozens of ring designs made with rare materials that would be hard to find anywhere else. Harvested from retired spacecraft and dinosaur fossils. Yeah, they partner with museums to acquire these fossils that are too small for exhibition. Then they're incorporated into small fragments before being forged by family-owned workshops and expert artisans. And since we know you guys are sci-fi fans, we know you're gonna love their new collection, Galactic Legends. They've created a bunch of pieces inspired by sci-fi movies and video games. And maybe you don't want to wear the ring, but you want to keep it around? If you do any hands-on work or are working out, sometimes it's not always convenient or feasible to wear a ring. But luckily for you, each ring comes with a chain that allows you to keep this special item close to you at all times. You can even get your ring engraved, perfect if you're getting it as a gift for someone. You know, I really dig this product and I want you guys to see these rings for yourself. So if you want to get your hands on this badass ring, click on the link in the description and use my code WHATIF for 25% off at checkout. When you think about it, this plan sounds even more ambitious when you realize we've yet to set foot on the planet just a single time. This plan also requires SpaceX to have thousands of reusable starships, and we don't even have one right now. I mean, SpaceX is trying to get to this point, but they're a little behind schedule. In 2021, Musk said a Starship would have flown in orbit many times before 2023. Yeah, not quite. SpaceX only had its first successful Starship launch in 2024. In 2020, Musk said humans would land on Mars by 2026, or if we were lucky, in 2024. Well, it's highly unlikely we're going to meet that deadline. Musk has now revised his prediction to setting foot on Mars by 2029, and fingers crossed on that one. But it's not all bad news. Okay, the first 2 starships exploded, but the 3rd starship had a successful test flight in March 2024. It did disintegrate during re-entry, but SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket is reusable, so that's promising news for a future trip to Mars. Now, to make 1 million people on Mars by 2050 a reality, well, the following things will need to happen. Figure out how to make the starships reusable so they don't burn up on re-entry, and then build 1,000 of them ASAP. Before 2029, send a couple crews over to set up a base that can accommodate 100,000 people. Next, find 100,000 able-bodied humans who want to live in a cold, low-gravity environment for potentially the rest of their lives. Then do that 10 more times while launching thousands of spaceships and spending trillions of dollars. Sounds easy, right? Well, that's not all. There are a lot more claims from Musk that we need to worry about. Number 5. Gravity won't be an issue. Okay, living on Mars is one thing, but there are a ton more issues to worry about when it comes to flying over there. One of them is gravity. Elon recently tweeted that Starship will be able to provide a bit of gravity during flight by having a small spin on the ship. Is this a viable way to protect future astronauts? And why does this even matter? Well, as far as we know, all of human evolution has taken place on planet Earth, so our bodies have developed to work best in the gravity found on our home planet. And Mars's gravity is a lot different from ours. It's only 38% of the surface gravity we have on Earth. But that's just on Mars. We also need to worry about gravity on the ships that will be getting there. And Starship would have 0 gravity. We know from previous missions to space what that does to the human body. A 0-gravity atmosphere causes your spine to break down and get longer, resulting in lower back pain. Your muscles would also get weaker. In one study, ISS astronauts' calf muscles shrunk 13% in 6 months. Plus, the lost bone calcium might make you constipated. With less gravity, your fluids move around more easily, resulting in a number of changes to your body. Things like a puffy face, bird leg syndrome, and even damage to your eyes. And these problems have been seen in astronauts who've been in space for much shorter time periods, like the Apollo 17 mission, which lasted only 12.5 days. The flight to Mars is 6 to 9 months. Not the best side effects to be dealing with if you're the team setting up a Mars base. So gravity could be a major issue for people traveling in space for long periods of time. Elon claims he'll have a solution for this, but how realistic is it? Well, there are 3 ways to do this, each with a potentially different problem. First, a gravitational pull can be created by accelerating the spaceship, but this would use more fuel and that would cost more. Or you could spin the spaceship. The good news is that once the spin gets going, no more fuel is needed to keep it spinning, but the bad news is you'd start to feel pretty sick if you were on board the spacecraft. The only way around this is to create a spacecraft big enough that you wouldn't notice the spinning, but we're talking super big. In order to not notice any spinning, the Starship diameter would need to be 112 meters. That's the size of a football field. Now, for reference, the diameter of the Starship we have now is only 9 meters. So, unless Musk plans to dramatically increase the size, those first Martians are going to be very dizzy or have to suffer the consequences of low gravity. Another solution could be to have 2 spacecrafts, connecting them with a cable and spinning them around each other. It's a cool idea, but it's never been tested before, and remember, we've got a 2029 target to hit. Now, that's just the ride over there. What happens when humans live on Mars? How will we deal with that low-gravity environment? Well, this is something that Elon hasn't talked much about yet. Maybe he'll create spinning houses that simulate Earth's gravity. Or maybe everyone will wear heavier clothes. We don't want to float away. Number 4, don't worry about radiation. Okay, now if Elon somehow does solve the gravity issue, we'd still need to worry about radiation. Musk has consistently downplayed the dangers of radiation, saying there's some risk, but it's minor. Unfortunately, we don't think that's true. Let's talk about radiation during the 6-month journey to Mars. Cosmic rays and protons emitted from the sun are two harmful sources of radiation to humans in space. When it gets deep into our cells, radiation can cause cancer. It can lead to cataracts and affect our eyesight. It can even damage our nervous system and our brains and chip away at our focus and memory. On Earth, our magnetic field and atmosphere protect us from radiation, but above Earth's atmosphere, the radiation rates are 100 to 1,000 times higher. Okay, so you're probably wondering if there's any way to fix this. Yeah, there is, but like everything else, it costs money, time, and research. Turns out water is a great form of protection against radiation. If we created a shield of about 20 centimeters of water around the spacecraft, well, we'd be all set. But water's heavy, and that would make the launch much more costly. Okay, that's the radiation on the journey, but how about radiation on the planet? Well, in addition to creating an atmosphere, it's proposed that we build an artificial magnetic shield for Mars to protect us from radiation. These are pretty complex solutions and problems we haven't quite figured out yet. We could live underground instead, but we'll talk about that a little more in a bit. These are problems that need solutions, but Musk really hasn't discussed any of them yet. Instead, he's been downplaying the radiation, saying it's no big deal.
The radiation risk is greatly overestimated.
Number 3, where will we live? Where will the Earthlings or new Martians live on Mars? Well, Musk has said that we'd likely be living in glass domes for the first 100 years or so. Now, that sounds super cool. It's exactly what I dream of when I think about living on Mars, but could this actually be a reality? Yeah, not quite. Mars is incredibly dangerous. Martians would need protection from meteorites, radiation, temperature fluctuations, and they'd need their home to be properly pressurized. A beautiful, multifaceted glass dome would be stunning to look at, but it'd be hard to manufacture, insulate, and seal. It also wouldn't provide good enough protection against these dangers. Accommodating the extreme temperature changes on Mars would be hard. From day to night, temperatures swing wildly from 3 degrees Celsius to as low as minus 91 degrees Celsius. The pressurized air inside the domes would expand and contract. Windows on the ISS have 4 panes of glass of various thickness to accommodate such swings. Creating this type of structure on the Martian surface to house 1 million people would be incredibly costly. In the short term, it's more science fantasy than science fiction. Now, the simplest way to get the best protection is to have a habitat underground. Now, this could create problems with dust contaminating the habitat as people enter and exit. It's also a lot less interesting to prospective Martians. Another option would be setting up a habitat in Mars's lava tubes. There'd be safety from the dust, except at the entrance, and the tube would provide radiation shielding and keep you safe from toxic dust and debris. Inside, you can build your ideal home. Would you like a Gothic castle in your lava tube? Now, regardless of how we live on Mars, it's safe to say it won't be a utopia-like city full of glass domes. For the first couple centuries, Martians will be hobbled underground, struggling to survive. Number 2, fission-powered lettuce. In 2017, Musk was talking about growing plants on Mars by compressing the atmosphere. No, we can't do that. Martian soil is toxic. We'll explain more on that in a second, and Musk never really elaborated on how we could compress the atmosphere on Mars. In 2019, Musk also suggested that we could grow plants through underground hydroponics. That's where plants are grown in water with some nutrients added. This process would be powered by solar panels on Mars's surface, but there's a major issue with this claim. Getting energy through solar is going to be incredibly tricky, and the 1 million Martians Musk wants on the planet are going to need a lot of power. But due to the distance from the sun, Mars gets less than half the sunlight that we get on Earth. Not to mention the constant dust storms that often block out the sun. This would make it a lot more difficult to harvest solar energy. We'd also have to account for the higher radiation on Mars and the fact that the dust could muck up the solar panels. So Elon's suggestions about solar panels being an important source of power seem to be pretty unrealistic. Instead, a better option might be nuclear power. This type of energy comes from nuclear fission and can be unsafe, but might be our best option to generate a lot of energy on Mars. Although they'll emit radiation, we'll just make sure they're buried somewhere safe. Okay, now that we have some power, let's go back to growing our food. We wouldn't be able to grow veggies in Martian soil due to its calcium perchlorate content. This is a toxic salt found on Mars. So we'll give Elon credit and say he got that right when he said we should try to grow our plants through hydroponics. But pulling this off could come with a number of issues. For one, not every plant is able to be grown in water. Have you ever seen an apple or a pear tree growing from a bowl of water? Also, root vegetables would be harder to grow. Carrots and potatoes prefer to grow in soil. Wheat and corn also couldn't be done through these methods. I guess the Martians will be eating a lot of leafy greens. And there are some other problems with hydroponics. It's expensive to set up, and the system is dependent on power, and it needs to be micromanaged, from calibrating the nutrient solution pH to clearing up clogged pipes. And worst of all, hydroponic plants tend to pick up waterborne fungal and bacterial diseases, which might destroy your entire food supply. While we're on the topic, cows and pigs can't be grown hydroponically. We might be able to pull off growing chickens on Mars, but our best bet would be insects. Musk hasn't talked about this yet. I wonder if he'd sell us on the fact that crickets and silkworms and termites make a great pie filling. So growing food on Mars is possible, but again, the 1 million people come into question. How would we be able to grow enough food to sustain this kind of population? It's a problem that hasn't been solved yet, but Elon's next claim might be able to make all the problems we've talked about so far irrelevant. That's only if he can somehow pull it off, and I have my doubts. Number 1, let's nuke Mars. It'd be amazing if we didn't have to worry about any of this, and if Mars just had an atmosphere like Earth. Well, Elon might just have the solution. On the Late Night with Stephen Colbert show, Musk theorized that he could get an atmosphere going on Mars by nuking the poles to release solid carbon dioxide ice.
Drop thermonuclear weapons over the poles.
Could this plan work? Well, we don't think so. Let's see why. The main problem with Mars's atmosphere is that there's very little of it. It has just 1% of the pressure of Earth, and it's made up of carbon dioxide. Getting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere would make it thicker, and one way to do that is to heat the poles by nuking them. Okay, let's say Elon did this. How many nukes would he need? One estimate puts it at the entire stockpile of America and Russia. We don't think either country is ready to give up its nukes for this mission. Also, how long would it take for the radiation to dissipate? We don't know, but since this is a planet we're hoping to inhabit, we don't think this is the safest move. Unless, of course, you believe radiation is no biggie. So there isn't enough carbon dioxide to create the atmosphere we need on Mars. Could we drill into the ground to release more? Well, we don't have the technology to do that yet. And finally, even if we did get this carbon dioxide out, would it stick around? Mars lacks a magnetic field, which is a problem. The CO2 would just dissipate. All this talk of carbon dioxide is making me hyperventilate. Since humans can't survive on carbon dioxide, we'd have to get plants going to convert that carbon dioxide to oxygen. So how in the long run do we create an atmosphere? Well, before generating any gases, we need to make sure they'll stick around. For this, we need to make sure a planetary magnetic field was in place. Plus a little more gravity would help. For that, we'd need to maybe get some asteroids to Mars to increase its mass. For a few $1 trillion and some sci-fi technology, we could start working on those two items first. Nuking the planet would probably be our last and most unrealistic option when it comes to making Mars more habitable. So here's the bottom line. Will humans get to Mars? Yes, but it probably won't be by 2029, and we definitely aren't getting 1 million of us there by 2050. And sure, Elon has made some pretty outrageous claims about the planet, but he'll likely be one of the main people helping us become an interstellar civilization. But Mars is just the start. What about populating Venus? I'm sure there's some pretty crazy ideas for how we'd get that done. But that sounds like a story for another What If.